This government meeting is brought to you by Eastworks and our local cable subscribers.
All right, welcome to the Easthampton Economic Development and Industrial Commission meeting of March 21st, 2023. I'm delighted you're all here. We will not be joined today by Jeff Bagg, City Planner. He is participating in one of the public interviews of school reuse proposal respondents, and he has to go to the planning department meeting this evening. So the man needs some time to get through his day. So what have I done with the agenda? Here we go. Has everyone had a chance to review the February meeting minutes? And did you get to the very last part, which was described by our minutes taker, Cassie Eckhoff?
I will strike that section from the final minutes.
Will you? Because that's the minutes we're talking about approving, Cassie.
I know. So I moved to approve them as amended.
Must we amend them?
We don't have to.
This is in reference to the Dunkin' Donuts conversation.
Yes.
Yes. I did feel that there was perhaps a bit more nuance than only complaints, but I was fine with it either way. I'm not too proud, it's fine.
If you would like to propose that we amend them, we can vote pending the removal of the, I don't know which part.
I think I would strike both sentences.
Okay. All right. So pending removal of complaints about Dunkin' Donuts. Why do you hate Massachusetts? Very good. So having said that, would we like any, do we have a motion to approve the February minutes?
Can I move?
I believe you can.
Okay,
Sure.
I'm going to.
Second.
Chris
Chris
seconds,
seconded.
Tom
Chris
seconds,
seconded.
outstanding. So any further discussion about these minutes? All right, all in favor, holler aye to approve the February meeting minutes.
Aye.
Unanimous. All right. Sean, you've joined us. I'm delighted that you're here. Is there anything you'd like to share with us that is not on the agenda?
It is going to be touching on the stuff that's on the agenda. I was only at one of these meetings, and one of the other things from the agenda, I wasn't at the meeting for, so I don't know, but I did want to touch on it anyway, because it is also of interest to me, so.
Okie dokie. Thanks for coming. David Kutcher.
Just a note that Councillor Owen Zarrett would like to be invited to the next meeting if possible. He said add him to the invite list.
Okay. Does he have a particular thing he wants to participate in?
He just wants to hear where we're at with lots of the development things that we've been discussing, and that's it.
Okay. Very good.
It's a public meeting. Is he looking to participate or something?
I think he's looking to participate and wants to have a greater discussion and understanding of the gas pipeline and our thoughts on development and master planning.
Development and master planning. Okay. Well, so he can, as Chris points out, he can attend if he wants to. It is a public meeting, so depending on whether we're going to put that on our next meeting's agenda is probably of interest to him. So we can decide that today. It's on our conversation list today to do some of that. So actually, let me see here. Apologies, I need transparency moment. I need a moment to find the email from Jeffrey Bagg. Okay, so I'm proposing to switch around some elements of the agenda because the updates from the planning department will not take 10 minutes. They will take about 30 seconds. If you can live with that, I will lead with that now, which is, as I shared previously, the evaluation committee for the school reuse is doing public interviews. One was yesterday at 4, one is today at 4:30, one is tomorrow at 4:30. They are public in the sense that people can attend or view. They are not public in the sense that anyone can offer questions. They will be recorded, and so they should be available on the city website afterwards, so we can decide to review those, make that some homework, divvy that some of that up if we're interested in that. And tonight's planning board meeting is at 6, and it will include a public hearing, round 3, for the Tasty Top development. It will include a first look at the traffic peer review. So there is that's coming to the Tasty Top public hearing tonight, which will be the most substantial amount of new information really that we've gotten in the way of what modifications might be made to that proposal. So that's the updates from the planning department. From there, is there anybody who wants to comment on anything related to those things right now? Because we've also got the RFP responses on the agenda elsewhere. No? Cool. All right. So, old business. The Main Street visioning kickoff had to be rescheduled because of the massive snowstorm last week. It has been rescheduled to next Tuesday at 6, I think, 7. Is it 6 or 7? Who can tell me? Who can tell me? The answer is 6 to 7:30 at the Easthampton Congregational Church. All are welcome. So if you want to have a hand in what we are thinking about as a community, about what could be true about Main Street's redesign, that will be a really valuable event, I'm sure. Sierra Vista Commons Tasty Top. At the last public hearing, which was round 2 of public hearings, Tom had an opportunity to speak. Chris, were you there as well? No? Okay. Kayam Jamrog McQuaid of the the Housing Coalition of Easthampton, which is not a municipal committee, just a community org that has been thinking about housing and how we can advocate for it in the area. Also presented an argument in favor. And so that I have submitted, some of the, I would call it at this point, from the perspective of EDIC, generic support for Tasty Top's redevelopment as Sierra Vista Commons. I submitted that in writing. I do not plan to go this evening. I have said what I can say. I will be viewing on the internet. Sounds like Tom will be there in person. Is there anybody who has a different perspective about how EDIC should be representing itself and its views at that meeting tonight?
I just want to thank you, Tom, for going, and thank you, Gwen, for going in the past. I know that you all have lives, everyone here does, and I know a lot of us try to do as much as we can, but these things are not necessarily fun. They're not necessarily easy to fit into your schedule, and I appreciate all the public advocacy work you guys do.
I think we're doing a good job representing here and there, and all of us are showing up to the things that are important, and I think our coverage is pretty widespread, so good job, EDIC. I'm proud of us. The gas moratorium discussion with the legislators that we had merely a month ago, it doesn't seem true. It feels like 100 years. We talked at that time about not wanting to bring them back to another conversation without having a set of, maybe not interview questions, but a set of topics that we had a perspective on, or that we wanted to get their very specific insights about. And to feel like we had a stance of some kind at minimum. And that stance doesn't have to be for or against a gas moratorium. It can be however nuanced we need it to be. What other things have come to your mind since that time about how we might want to move forward with this topic in this group, whether there are other entities that we want to share it with or what? Sean.
Yes, this was something I was hoping to be able to comment on a little bit.
Yeah, please do.
Yeah, so I had done a bunch of, I done a little bit of research after the last conversation. I have a big list of bullets, so I'll try to be relatively brief with some of the salient points. One of the things that came up was, that natural gas, sort of a confluence of things that came up was that natural gas was a bridge fuel, and also, like Senator Vallis kept talking about, how we could potentially sell methane to different communities. Like maybe we just needed to present it differently as like, these are the repercussions if we don't say yes to a gas pipeline. So I did look up both natural gas, bridge fuel, and cooking with gas are all marketing tools or all marketing terms from the natural gas industry. So it doesn't feel to me like they need a lot of help doing marketing and selling themselves to communities. There is, of the available pipelines that were run through, that were being proposed for all to run through Springfield or Holyoke, at those public meetings, there wasn't a single one of them, according to one of the local news sources. Again, I have some citations I can send out if there's an email address I can drop them to. There was not a single resident there that was in favor of those pipelines. So there were large meetings without a single person supporting them. In 2022, late 2022, September 14th to September or to 22nd, the Dallas Fed sent out a research survey, and executives from 134 oil and gas firms responded to the question of, do you expect the age of inexpensive U.S. natural gas to come to an end as liquefied natural gas exports to Europe expand? And 70% of them said yes. So the idea that investing in natural gas now will be cheap for any sort of term in the future seems to be, according to the natural gas industry, would be questionable. So it seems like kind of like throwing good money after bad. There was information brought up about the explosions that we've had in Massachusetts in the past, and of those, Columbia Natural Gas paid a record $53 million fine, which represented like 0.5% of their yearly operating budget. And then they sold themselves to Eversource. So that doesn't seem like it's going to be something that like really deters any gas company from allowing leaks to continue. The vast majority of leaks in Western Massachusetts exist in Springfield and Holyoke already. So if we are introducing extra pipelines that go through those communities, then we're basically asking those communities to deal with the health problems that come along with those gas leaks, which are pretty much inevitable to be happening. And that is more or less the list of things that I found that I wanted to make sure this group is aware of. And again, if there's an email address I can send it to, I have citations for all that.
I can share that with you.
Thank you.
Any responses or comments from the group? Go ahead, Chris.
Thanks for that, Sean. That was pretty good and cogent. I just want to state my position is not more pipelines. I just think that the line that they're giving that they don't have enough capacity is just an extortionary move to get more pipelines. I'm not for more pipelines. I'm just for the end of the moratorium, just to be clear.
David Kutcher.
Just to clarify, we weren't looking for more pipeline. It was that the city has a moratorium on hookups to pipeline. So you can't get a gas hookup. It's not that there's necessarily not enough capacity here. It's that any building that has let their natural gas connection lapse cannot be turned back on again. So it's not really a capacity issue, I think, that we're concerned about. But I think that, in that, I'm thinking about the Tasty Top development that has apparently 3 restaurants that are going in. Again, are they going to have gas hookups for those restaurants? or if a restaurant wants to come in downtown, but just like the Casara situation, has to renovate and do any kind of renovation, will they then be locked out of it? So I think it's not necessarily like the adding of new pipeline, but tapping into the existing foundation that we have here and the existing capacity that we have here.
Okay. Yep. That's a good reminder. Tom?
I agree with Chris and Dave. I think the capacity issue is a hoax, and that, however, it's the one trump card they have to hold us hostage because New England won't allow a pipeline to go through. So they can basically say, okay, you say no on the pipeline, we say no on any new hookups. I think our position from the beginning was not pro pipeline, not against pipeline, not pro moratorium against. It was, how does this impact new business to our community? And I believe that moratorium is obviously more than Easthampton. I believe it might be New England. I'm not 100% sure of that, but it's bigger than Easthampton, obviously. So to your point about new restaurants, it's my understanding, or new development, it's my understanding that the Tasty Top development is, their proposal is for propane. And I think it might be underground propane tanks. So tell me that that's safer than natural gas, who knows? But there's an added cost to that affects their whole business model. I'm not sure what's going on with the hot tub place. They may be walking away, for all I know, because of the cost of propane versus natural gas. Natural gas runs down Holyoke Street, 50 feet from the side of my house. Would I like to tie into natural gas instead of oil? Sure, can't do it. How many homes might convert to natural gas? Can't do it. So they're holding us hostage. They can do it. They've got more time and money than we do. They can hold us hostage forever. And again, I think for this body, the issue was, how does that impact local business, new business, existing businesses who want to convert or expand or do whatever, and that's where it begins to hurt.
Yeah. David, I think your hand was up.
Sorry to jump in again, but if I remember correctly, the moratorium is Easthampton. The city has placed the moratorium. It's not necessarily now, because everything I've been reading has said that it's cities and towns opted into the moratorium.
I don't think so. I think that the gas company made a moratorium on certain cities and towns. I don't think there was any opting in. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure there wasn't. And if there was, there's no opting out.
Okay. I saw Sean, his hand, and then Paul.
Paul was actually first.
Was he? Why is Google doing this to me? All right, Paul, please.
I would just say that, I have a couple thoughts, but first of all, I do think, David, that Chris is right, that it's not something we opted into. I recall during our conversation, one of the things that Senator Velas was talking about was giving, I think, up to 10 communities the opportunity to at a municipal level ban new hookups or essentially impose their own moratorium. But that's something that no city or town, I think, has had the ability to do or has done thus far. But it is being imposed upon communities. It's not every city or town in the state, but I do know, obviously, it's Easthampton. I know Northampton. I know Holyoke. I think maybe Hadley. There are other town communities in the area nearby that are on a moratorium that would like to not be. But the other thought I had, it's not necessarily related to anything that anyone has typically said, but it was just a thought that I had after that conversation, was just about the draw that the current households are putting on the supply, if it is a supply issue or whatnot, and just like thinking about how conversions to heat pumps can help alleviate some of that. And that seems to be like the first kind of alternative that is practical to replace some of the use cases that really gets away from the fossil fuels. Whereas even like propane is just like submitting one for the other, and there's different pros and cons. Heat pumps, obviously, they're very expensive up front, but they do save money over time. I was reading more about them and how they're efficient. And I just feel like the cost, the big cost barrier to getting heat pumps is so high that for a lot of families, it's just not realistic. They're just not going to put 10 grand on the table for it. But I do think that we're going to see more incentive programs through the state probably, and maybe through some other bodies that are going to help more houses get onto the heat pumps, especially as the technology becomes more efficient and more developed over time. That was my bad.
Sean, do you have more to add to that? And then Chris.
Yep, yes, ma'am. So a couple of counterpoints to a couple of things. For starters, when we're talking about businesses connecting into the gas, that is on the assumption that natural gas is going to remain cheap. But the fossil fuel executives literally are telling everybody that natural gas is not going to remain cheap for very long. So if those business plans are created with the assumption of inexpensive fossilized methane, and then the price goes way up, are those businesses going to fail? What's that going to do for Easthampton? That literally is in the survey from the Fed in 2022. So I don't know that we as a community should be betting against the oil and gas executives that are telling us that their aim is to raise prices within the next 2 years. And then also on from a restaurant standpoint, a lot of, their restaurants are largely going to induction cooktops because they are more efficient. They don't have a lot of the waste heat. So that is also something that like a business doesn't need to do natural gas in order to be able to run a restaurant by any stretch of the imagination. And induction has traditionally been more expensive. I just bought an induction stove for $800 recently. They are not necessarily more expensive. Same sort of thing for the heat pump. I installed a heat pump in my house. My cost out of pocket for that was $6,000 because there's a $10,000 state credit right now. So literally just did that a few months ago.
Okay. Chris.
It's okay. It was covered. Thank you.
Was it? Okay. So our issue is about how the moratorium, the lack of access, not necessarily capacity, affects business prospects. There are a lot of nuances to this. Does anyone have a particular leaning about what you might like to follow up on next? Whether this is something that we want to pursue, advocate for, get enthusiastic about at a different level, take in a slightly different direction? Is there something we'd like to do about energy, something like that, Chris?
Yeah, I mean, as much as I hate to say it, I don't think that there's anything EDIC can do about the moratorium. And so I guess figuring out or brainstorming other ways, particularly for restaurants, because there are good solutions for heating and energy pretty much across the board. But, cooking is one thing. Cooking with a gas stove is generally best with gas. So maybe the new induction stoves can keep up. I have no experience with them. But I don't know. I guess if we were going to move forward as a group, then maybe we should target the cooking issue. And is there something as a city that we can do to incentivize that? Maybe not, but it might be worth looking at.
Okay. Tom and then Mo.
I would agree with what Chris said in the first part there, which is not that I don't agree with everything Chris says, but I've got a sense from the legislators that we spoke to that there's not much they can do about it either. So this is a much bigger issue than Easthampton as far as the moratorium is concerned, and all the legislators in Massachusetts aren't going to get rid of the moratorium. I would just say to Sean, and this isn't really a counterpoint, just an observation, I don't think any new business factors in when they're thinking of how they're going to use energy, and they're thinking of natural gas versus some other source, I don't think they're factoring in based on price. It's based on, I'm not exactly how sure to say this, ease of use, if you will. Natural gas coming into to 2 or 3 restaurants and 200 living units seems to me to be much more efficient than, not cost-wise, but than oil tanks in every unit or other types of alternatives that may or may not be more expensive. But I'm not sure of a business that factors into their business plan a certain type of energy based on cost. They're doing it based on convenience.
Could be true. Mo?
So I just wanted to, I don't know necessarily what folks are thinking about, although it's a good question for me to be asking as I'm moving forward. Why are they making the decision that they're making as far as their equipment goes and cooking and that sort of thing in restaurants? But I did want to say, but that's raised my awareness, but going forward. But I wanted to also just say to Sean's point, induction cooking. I currently have an induction stove, and it's amazingly efficient. I had gas at one point prior to coming to Easthampton, wasn't very impressed with it, and the induction piece was incredible. It's way more efficient and way more responsive as far as cooking goes. I invested in my stove, and I love to cook, and it's a tool in my kitchen. So I'm not sure. I wonder how other professional cooks would be thinking about that. That's all.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, that's something that I'm certain we could find perspectives on, is what that means to make that transition, or to have a wide-ranging experience with different types of ranges. Sean.
So yeah, the cooking with gas was literally like the fossil fuel industry came up with that phrase and marketed it because they did, user research and basically found out that nobody cared what was heating the house or what was heating the dryer, but they did care what they were cooking with. So there's a long history here, and cooking with gas is explicitly a marketing term. So every time we use it, we are basically using the marketing term that the natural gas, the fossil fuel industry has provided to us. And then on the cost thing, if I recall correctly from the first meeting, that was actually one of the reasons that Easthaven, is that the name of the hot tub business?
Easthaven, I think.
Why they were raising the point about natural gas is because they excessively thought that electric heating would be too expensive. And, I don't want to speak to any particular business plan. I mean, there is something else that I did research on as Framingham providing geothermal heat as a city utility. So that's something that's kind of interesting for this sort of thing. But I do think that in some cases that like the cost to the business is absolutely part of their plan. Again, like if it's predicated on natural gas prices staying low, I think that we should question whether or not that is going to be maintained.
I believe that Easthaven's original challenge was in thinking about the sheer amount of power required to operate the number of hot tubs they wanted to power, and they were, but I may be under remembering, and that like the amount of BTUs needed might, if you were trying to generate that with electricity, might be wildly expensive. This is the part where I don't really understand what I'm talking about anymore. So Paul, what do you have to weigh in on here?
Oh, I was basically going to say what you just said, Quinn, that I remembered that some of the issue with Easthaven Hot Tub was that they weren't able to get the efficiency without using natural gas that would allow them to reach the BTUs that they needed to heat that. That is a very unique kind of business. It's, obviously there's not a whole lot of those, or there's probably not a whole lot of businesses that need to use that much power for that reason. They're just literally just heating up water, huge tubs of water. Also, I'm interested in the induction technology. I think that it's probably a lot better than, like, I came from having grown up with gas in the home and then now cooking with electric, to use an electric company's industry term, that is not really that great. But induction seems very interesting. From what I've read, it's far superior, and it could be practical for restaurant use. I don't run a restaurant, I don't know. But then the other point I wanted to make, before it slips my mind, about the heating on oil. I just feel like it would be a great thing if we could get people off of just burning pure oil from their basements. If that means getting them on the natural gas, that's better than burning pure oil. And if we can get a different solution, then that's even better overall. But I feel like oil is probably the dirtiest fuel that we have, and we're just pumping that right in the air. At least natural gas burns clean. But I can see Sean shaking his head, so he doesn't like that. But I don't like the big tanks of oil being burnt up all over town, frankly.
Right. So if we want to keep going with this, we can. I did want to give a considerable amount of time to the school building RFPs, but you guys can push back on that and say 30 minutes is far too many for discussing the school building RFPs. Like, it's not, we can make a decision to the extent that we are informed about doing that, or we can continue about the energy discussion. What is your preference at this point?
I think switching over is fine, and if there's more time at the end, we could get back to this, but we could also end early if we did.
Okay.
I just wanted to say, wait,
Cassie, yep.
my hand raising button's not working.
Okay. Your hand raising in actuality is working great.
Barbie?
Your hand raising in actuality is working great. So.
Oh, I'm sorry. Nope, I'll back off. Never mind.
No, what's up?
I just want to be the child of the 60s and 70s that says, no, if you read the news today, not looking particularly good for the planet, and any kind of shift not away from alternative technologies is a dangerous path as far as I'm concerned. That's all. I know it's not a popular opinion.
Yeah, no, it's welcome. The range of views is what I'm here for. What if we put this on a next meeting's agenda? What do we think our purpose is? Chris?
How do we change business owners' abilities to do things via gas or not? And
Okay.
Because we can't change state policy.
Okay.
So I had a question.
Mo, what's your question?
So do we have any input from any of our restaurant folks? Are we trying to solve a problem that's, I don't want to make light of anything either, because climate change and all of this stuff, but what problem are we trying to solve here? Is there have we gotten feedback that we're trying to solve a particular problem?
My recollection is that at minimum, we have at least one example in the form of Casara, which had to put itself in an interesting situation to get enough gas to power what it needed to run there. Don't quote me. Tom, and then Chris.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think, Mo, it's a problem specific to restaurants. I think it's a problem specific to new business development that are looking to use natural gas. And again, there may be alternatives that they could look at or what have you, but right now we're dealing with, we faced it with a new school, okay? We hit a roadblock with a new school. We actually ran that school for 2 or 3 months on propane because we couldn't hook up to gas.
Okay.
We have a problem with East Haven. I don't know if they've come up with a solution yet. The Tasty Top development faced it, but apparently their solution is propane. Not sure about Casera, but what other businesses are saying, you know what, I've got an idea for a new business, but I guess I can't open it unless I'm going to use oil or electricity or what have you, or come up with some new alternative that's available today. But to your question, Mo, I'm not aware of it being, other than Casera, I'm not aware of it being a problem specific to restaurants. Our concern at CIC was that it may be a deterrent to business development, expansion, what have you.
Okay,
Chris, do you want to add to that?
fair enough.
I mean, everything that Tom said, but it's definitely a deterrent. But the angle I'm coming from is when you let monopoly, they're going to monopoly. And so there's not much that we can do about it, at least through an Easthampton lens. If we do have if someone has something that we could actually do through an Easthampton lens,
Right.
I'm on board, but I don't know what that is.
I wonder if, as we're moving forward and we're collecting some of these, we've got a few, East Haven, the school, Casara. I don't know what else could be floating around out there. But the more data, like the more, concreteness that we have, the more impact, we can attach something to, right? Follow what I'm saying?
Okay, Chris, and then Paul.
So I can give one more data point of my own. When I first converted from oil to gas, it was under the moratorium, and I had a pipe running in just for a cooking stove. And by sheer luck, my pipe was big enough to handle a new boiler, but I wouldn't have been able to replace that boiler with a very high efficiency one, even though I wouldn't do the same thing now. But I was burning 1,400 gallons of oil per year in my house. Old house, big house, no insulation. That's how it came to me. But, there'd be another 1,400 gallons of oil being burnt a year if I couldn't get what I got through my pipe that happened to be there cooking. I just got lucky. But I'm sure there's plenty of people not getting lucky.
Right.
Yeah, I guess my only last point about this is, this is a tough conversation because it's very complicated. It's not necessarily something that we as EDIC can fix, that Easthampton alone can fix. But I think where my only view is in this is I would love to see what does the roadmap look like to get us to the zero emissions future that we want. Like, how do we get to the point where we're not worried about whether or not we have natural gas because everything we can do, we need to do with electric,
Did we lose Paul?
Paul's
No, I'm
frozen.
here. Am I?
Yeah.
Okay, we lost you for a brief second.
Oh.
Sean, and then I think we will close this out, and I will do my best to put it on next month's agenda with a guiding question for us.
I just wanted, this was very back of the napkin sort of thing, but I did do a little bit of research. Should anybody ever be interested in taking another approach, if we covered the approximately 1/4 of the parking surface in Easthampton with solar panels, we could power the entirety of Easthampton. And the ROI on that would be approximately 4 to 5 years if we were using Easthampton as a municipal power plant. Which seems like it would be a good investment. Now, obviously, that's just me, some schmo, doing like some internet research. So that's kind of crazy talk, and it's probably not quite that good. But my point is, the IPCC came out with a new thing that says we're in real bad shape on the whole climate front. So, seemed to me being a little bit more bold is worthwhile, and it could actually come with serious financial benefits to the town of Easthampton.
Yeah. Interesting. You've stirred the barrel. All right. I didn't see who went up first. Is it Chris? Is it Tom? Who's going first?
Sean, I believe your numbers there because I also read a study from, I think it was MIT that said that, I don't remember the exact cost. I think it was $6 trillion or whatever it was. The return on investment for alternative fueling the whole world was about 6 years. It would take to pay back. So
No.
I believe you.
Tom?
Just back to Mo's question / point for a moment. Easthampton would be a small tip of the tail wagging the dog here. Back to Chris's point about this monopoly we're dealing with. Unfortunately, Mo, if we came out tomorrow and said every business in Easthampton is going to close because they can't get natural gas, the gas company would say, oh, well, your problem. Not going to change us in a moratorium. So unfortunately, we can come up with all the anecdotal issues we can find. It's not, there's nothing this group, there's nothing the city of Easthampton, there's nothing I think the governor of Massachusetts can do to change the moratorium. In fact, the gas company is blaming the governor because she supported not allowing the pipeline to come through. So unfortunately, we'll have to just find other alternative ways, new efficient ways, what have you, to heat our homes and do whatever without natural gas. But I doubt we'll ever have a big enough impact to have them change something like a moratorium, unfortunately.
Chris.
I'll add that not only would they say they don't care, they'd probably be celebrating because that's more gas they could export to an unregulated world market.
Yep.
Ooh, bit of a downer Tuesday. Okay. Y'all, we're absolutely cutting this conversation right now and moving on to school building RFP responses. So here's what I have to say. My thoughts were, I read portions of all three and was delighted that we have the three we have. I was interested in the fact that two respondents were looking at all three buildings. One response was looking just at, is it Maple Street? And Kayam brought to the Housing Coalition yesterday his early preliminary perspective on the three. I could not stick around long enough to hear his final conclusion if he had one. But they're really thoughtful, really impressive responses that do important things that to my mind align with what the RFP laid out as valuable criteria to the evaluation committee and to our community. So I'm ready to open it up to you for comments to the extent that you've had a chance to look at them briefly, thoughts about how EDIC might want to weigh in on that. Paul has shared, and I sent this to you last week, an early letter of support, just being like, hey, we got these responses, hooray, hooray, let's make good decisions. So where would we like to start? Tom?
Gwen, I'm guessing I perused them even less than you did, but just looked at them generically. And thanks, Paul, for putting that letter together. My only question for the group was, I'm pretty sure Paul's letter basically says, these are three great proposals. We support these proposals. I'm wondering though, if the city were to accept the Maple Street only one, then the city's still stuck with two empty schools. And should we narrow our focus and basically say that we are supporting the RFPs that propose to use all three buildings? We're not necessarily saying we don't like the Maple Street one. We're just saying we like better the ones that use all three buildings.
I had a follow-on question along those lines, which may come across as very naive. Here I am ready to be publicly naive. Could you accept the one for Maple Street School, which I like the best for Maple Street, and have conversations with the other two submitters and be like, what would you think about doing this with just Pepin and Center? I don't know. That could be like, absolutely not. That is a bridge burner. But anyway, it was what I thought about. David, what are your thoughts?
Oh, goodness. I have lots of thoughts. One is I'm skeptical of any public-private partnership. So I think one of the RFPs had the auditorium as we're going to maintain an auditorium that's open to the public. And that just seems like a recipe for failure. That's my first flag. My second flag is, being that this is a city that, okay, let's table that. I want a proposal that answers all of the problems and takes them on head first. So as opposed to what you were just saying, like you like the Maple Street proposal, but it leaves two others open. That to me opens the door to lots of potential issues of having to do this again and everything that goes with that. I would love one company who's going to undertake the whole project, all projects start to finish, and does it and delivers it, and that there's no loose ends, There's nothing that could possibly, bleed over into other situations. Regarding your RFP process, so the problem with that, and the problem with that most municipalities run into in this regard, as someone who has helped organizations run RFP processes, is that you're changing the goalpost. You've already invested lots of time and money into following the guidelines of the RFP that's put out. And anytime you do that, you risk two things. One, that those people are going to walk away from the project and you're going to be left with fewer bidders. But two, they can go after the municipality and sue them for damages in that the project has now changed. Both of which are not good situations. So in that we have good proposals, it would behoove us to accept a good proposal. Because they might not come back for a second round.
Yeah. Okay. Useful perspective, Chris.
Yeah, those are interesting thoughts, David. And I had thought about changing the goalposts on the developers like that, which is it's a good thought. The Maple only project is also my favorite Maple project. But we also got 3 responses, which we were hoping for 6 to 10, like in a utopian society, but we were really scared of getting 1 or none. Because building costs and all that stuff. But what I didn't like was saying we're going to buy the building for, and I don't remember the numbers, $100,000 or $1 million or whatever. I think it was $100,000. And then we're going to come and ask for CPA funds of $150,000 later. I would rather they just not pay us and then only ask for less on the CPA, because those CPA funds are very limited and are very useful as a leveraging tool for other grants. So you deplete them, it hurts more than just spending money out of the, not getting 100,000 offers. But aside from that, it would be great. See, I didn't actually see anywhere that, I guess that was just built into the proposals that if we don't give them Maple, they won't do the other 2 schools in the proposals that proposed for all 3, right? I don't think it was explicitly said. I looked briefly, not hard though. So it's possible that they'd still be able to go forward with altered numbers on just the other 2. Because in an ideal world, I would choose the Maple. It's not my choice, but I would choose the Maple one that was submitted for Maple, and then let one of the other 2 developers do the other 2 schools as they submitted sans Maple. Don't know if that's possible.
Interesting. I had not read I had not paid attention to the detail about the CPA funds. That's a useful perspective. I did think, to your point, David, about the public auditorium, that was going to be, I think, in Pepin, and I thought, that is down the street from City Space, a place that we are now actively trying to engage as a very public venue. And I'm not certain that actually that particular portion meets the needs of the community, given what we're trying to do with City Space. So that was an interesting point I also noted. Paul?
Yeah, a couple thoughts. One thing, I felt similarly to Tom that it was really good opportunity to get all 3 buildings redeveloped. To me, the proposal that was just for the 1 seems like a distant third to the other 2, just from my view. Just because it only does the 1 building, and then we'd still have the other 2. I don't know that I hadn't considered the idea of trying to split the other proposals and say, okay, well, what if you just did, Center and Pepin? That to me, I hadn't really thought of that, but I do think that there are probably can of worms type issues. My reading of the proposal that I saw where they were talking about keeping the auditorium, from when I read it, I didn't read it thinking that it would be necessarily for, city use. I mean, I read something about saying it was community space that would have a kitchen attached. I wondered if that was an amenity for the people who are going to be living there. The only part of Pepin that I know that there's a desire from anyone in the city that they want to do some sort of like partnership with. It's just in relation to the gymnasium. I know that like Easthampton Basketball Association would like to be able to continue to use that gymnasium if it's possible through the process, and that the Parks Department is interested in trying to facilitate that. But I don't think that extends to the upstairs auditorium. Maybe it could if those conversations were had, but I'm just not familiar with them. Anyway, when I wrote the letter, I was trying to be conscious and respectful of the work of the scoring committee and the city council by not trying to make it sound like we were, trying to like preempt what they were going to say by, taking a stance like, oh, we think this one's the best or this one stinks or whatever. I was trying to be just very positive. I felt just really excited that we got those proposals. I felt like two of them were very particularly strong. And I think I shared some of the fears, right? A lot of us probably had that. What if we don't get any, or we only get one, or we only get one and it's not very good, And I think to have the proposals we got, I was pretty happy to see it. I feel like that was a success for the community. And so that's why I tried to write the positive letter without actually like saying we like this one more than the others, because I don't want to step on anybody else's toes. That was the thought process.
Thanks for that, Paul. I want to acknowledge that I see 3 hands up, and I also want to acknowledge that we're hearing a lot from the men of EDIC today, and I would like to hear from Mo or Cassie if you have thoughts you want to share at this point.
I don't have anything really at this point. I think Paul wrote the letter, correct? Right. Yeah, it was a good letter, and I think that it achieved your objective, that you didn't want to highlight any one particular project, but well said, voicing your concern and our support.
Cassie, anything that you'd like to weigh in with? No? Okay. So Chris, did you lower your hand?
No, I can go. I forgot to address David's concern about the public-private partnerships. I share that concern too a lot. I mean, I could see them getting a project after a year saying we can't afford the liability insurance for having the public come in. We're shutting it down, and there's nothing you can do about it because it's our building. So we'd have to do something very concrete with some sort of lease or something. But that's above, I think, certainly my pay grade. But EDIC might want to address that in the future before the papers are signed or something.
Okay, interesting. Thanks for that. That's useful. Tom.
Yeah, just to address that for a moment, if you recall when the city council was going through the RFP process, they kept referring to community connections, the auditorium, the gymnasium, what have you. And I'm fairly certain that in this scoring system they've come up with scoring these proposals, there were going to be points awarded for retaining those community connections. So I agree with you all about the reservations about public-private partnerships. However, I'm not faulting them for throwing them in there because it's going to give them more points in a scoring system. Now, whether that works long-term or not, I don't know, but it might help get them over the finish line for their project.
Okay. Reality check, Tom Brown. David.
No, you're totally right. I mean, there was definitely points awarded for that. And it reminded me of an old Simpsons episode when Homer is given the keys to the factory to design his own car. And it has every bell and whistle he could possibly throw onto this car, to the point where it costs more than a Ferrari and it's, a piece of crap. And that's essentially what you get here, is that they're awarding things that the community said they wanted without any forethought into the future of how that would operate. At the same time, as an RFP process, they've really ended up with an apples to oranges to bananas situation here with these proposals, where you really can't compare them without thinking about your strategic long-term goals of what you're trying to achieve, because they're also very different. Like even the nuance between the two that are most similar is very different because of that albatross of that private-public partnership situation, as well as, how they're trying to books with the purchasing price and everything else like that. So they are all very, very different options. I guess there's a question that, back to you, Gwen, which is like, can we endorse a project which would be like the Maple Street that punts 2 of the 3 buildings to a separate process? Like, I don't even know if that helps our development as a city, because it just basically postpones 2/3 of the project to a year or 2 years further down the road.
Right. Yeah, I don't even know what that would look like. Like if it was just hanging out with teammates, you'd be like, oh, well, they're able to do this one. Can you reduce the size? It's a different thing than working with people who are not already your teammates. I don't know what that is. So it's a fair point. I am curious about, because it's 4:57 per my clock, would we like to submit Paul's letter? If yes, are there any obvious amendments we would like to make? And would we like to put it on a future agenda to the extent that we have a sense of the timeline? Like, this isn't going to happen in the next month. Is it going to be approved in the next month? Chris, Tom, you seem more in the loop, and I've not remembered what Jeff Bagg thought the timeline might be.
I can have an answer for you in like 35 seconds.
35 seconds. All right, I'll wait that long. Because
I'm pretty sure, Gwen, I'm pretty sure that this committee that is scoring these RFPs, I believe, has to go back with a recommendation to City Council. My gut tells me City Council is going to refer to a subcommittee, because that's what they do. And then that subcommittee is going to chew on it for a couple of meetings, which is at least a month. Then they're going to bring back their proposal to the full council. We'll be lucky, and Jeff might have a different take on it, but we'll be lucky if they award this by June.
Right. Okay. So June is the month I had in my head about this. So it makes me wonder whether this is something where we keep some good notes, much gratitude to Cassie, about the things that are popping into our head. So we are curious about what this idea of the public partnership might actually look like in the long term, and how do you have conversations with a proposer, with a respondent about that? Like, give us evidence that this is something that you've done in the past that has been maintained in some way that we find admirable. I wonder if that's something that we could pose as a useful question to ask. And so we could submit this letter as it is now, say, hey, hooray, hooray, EDIC is on board with the fact that we've got something to work with here, and then refine our position moving forward. I have not paid attention to who's in line first. So whoever raised their hand first, you may speak now.
I don't know.
You. Was it Dave?
I think it was David.
David, go ahead.
I'm happy to work with whomever wants on this. Like I said, I've run RFP processes and whatnot. We can push back and say, like, based on the RFPs, these are our questions that we would like to submit to the proposers, and how to address the things that we find them. Because having them submit answers to our questions of their proposals is totally valid and within a standard RFP process. So getting those clarifications could be our role within the process.
Okay.
and helping towards where we see as the most beneficial towards the city from that perspective.
Yeah. Okay. Other thoughts on that? Paul, Chris?
I think that's a pretty good idea, David. I would rather, though, than instead of EDIC asking the questions to the developers directly, we submit that to whatever authority is going to be asking those questions to begin with. I don't know if the mayor is making a committee or what, or if it's just going to be her doing this. I don't know. But when you had mentioned a track record of the developers' past projects, that's one of the things on the RFP scoring system, is a track record is an advantageous thing. But regarding so that'll be taken into account by whoever is making this decision. But on the letter thing, I'm not a big fan of just like city council resolutions that don't really do anything but say they like something. I would prefer if we waited till we had something concrete to say than just send a happy letter out. I'll do it. I'm not going to stand and block it, but I think that we should probably wait till we have something of substance to issue.
Other thoughts on that?
Well, I just want to say, first of all, I'm not sure that public-private partnerships are necessarily bad. I think that we've done some of those that have been good for us. I think we have one with our solar field that feeds lower cost electricity to the municipality. That was a Mike Totznick thing. And I think that with the Old Town Hall, I mean, isn't the CPA spending, millions and millions of dollars on that? And isn't there a lease agreement with the city? So we have examples, I think, where they could be beneficial. But I think what I would hate to see would be that these proposals become, a divisive, argument in the city, and then we end up not getting any of them. Or, because we're like, oh, these are good, we really like these, but we want perfect. And because we don't have perfect, we can't unite behind something that's actually really good for us. So I think that would be the worst case scenario. And I hope that as a community, we'll find our way through this. And one of these proposals, hopefully one for all 3 buildings, goes forward and is successful and, contributes to our economy for years to come.
Yeah. Tom?
I'm guessing that Jeff could answer 98% of our questions before we're never going to have an opportunity to present questions directly to the developers. And even like in these meetings they're having as we speak, they're not allowing public input. So I think if Jeff has the time to attend our next meeting, he could probably answer the majority of our questions before we put together a letter of support.
Okay. Chris?
I agree. So I'm wary of public-private partnerships. I'm not against them. I think that if they're very well defined and very well regulated, they could be a great success. That's all I'm saying. We need to make sure that everyone is on the same page about exactly what's going to happen for some period of time, like 10 years, 20 years, whatever, something.
Okay. So, I think it's 5:03. I want to be done with this in the next 2 minutes. I think I would propose that we hold on submitting a letter of support until we have a little more information, probably pending our April meeting, which Jeff may or may not be able to attend. We can forward him questions in the intervening month and he can email them back and I will share them. So if we want to collect a bunch of those and shoot them to him, he can probably answer before the meeting and we can come to that meeting with more information and make a decision at that point about how we might like to express support and follow-up queries. Response to that idea?
Yes. Yes.
Oh, okay. We're all right with that. So we will, thank you for creating a non-blank page, Paul. That is an excellent, not even skeleton, like just really skinny person that we will put a little more meat on at the next meeting. And I think that's great. So we got some cool details today. Thank you for your conversation, for your attention to detail in those proposals, for your excellent questions. I wish you a very happy rest of your evening and I will see you in April. Would anyone like to change anything about how we end this? Make a motion. Want to do that?
I'd like to motion to adjourn.
Okay. Any second?
I'll second.
Great. Everybody seconds. Any further discussion? No. Okay. All in favor, holler goodbye.
Bye.
Goodbye. Thank you.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Bye, folks.
This government meeting is brought to you by Eastworks and our local cable subscribers.